AudioLab devlog number 13. I'm going to have to keep this brief because, as you can see here, it's pretty close to upload time already. I was going to record this yesterday, but then I spent an hour chasing down a crash that only happened in 32-bit Windows, which is exactly what I have to run here to get outputs. And then after that I had to do other stuff and couldn't get to it until now. So anyway, it's been another 3 weeks of kinda just chasing down loose ends and bug fixes and things, and not a whole lot of really exciting stuff going on, but I can show at least a few things that I've done. So one little important bit of data integrity feature thingy is that, so right, this little thing comes up when when there's some sort of modification that needs to be saved. If I undo, that doesn't go away. It should. Oh, what happens if I try to quit right now? Okay, I do get the confirmation dialog. Yeah, so confirmation dialog is new. If I try to quit with changes there, then it'll ask to save before quitting. However, okay, so I do have a little bug here. If I undo all the way back to the start, it doesn't act like it's a new file. Okay, so if I don't save that, I make a new document, and now I try quitting, it just quits. Okay. Anyway, yeah, so if I'm on another screen and I have like, well, this is not a good choice. Okay, so if I'm here and I input a couple of notes, then I go over to screen 1 and I change a few things. Sure, whatever. Then I go over to screen 3 and act like I'm making a sound here. I'm going to try to close the window. It refuses and it takes me to screen 1, so I have to confirm this or not. If I press cancel, it just cancels the whole process. I can say save and save this as something. Then it moves on to this screen, which has unsaved changes. I could say don't save. Here I could say cancel. So I've already said don't save to this. What's this going to do? It doesn't have the star up there, so it's decided that's not dirty. If I try to quit now, it does this screen. Okay, that's interesting. I think that did all the right things. I just realized I was testing a case that I hadn't actually specifically tested before. Anyway, yeah, and you might have spotted it for a moment there. I also have this little thing that pops up. That file I just saved tells me the status of I/O operations very briefly down here. And if I try to do something that fails, I happen to have some kind of invalid file here. I don't know why it's invalid, but for some reason it is. It beeps. Couldn't load that, just so you know that, something failed. There's some console output here that wouldn't be visible if you're running this just as a desktop application normally. So that little pop-up might need to go into some sort of log file or log that's accessible buried away in some menu somewhere. Because if you miss it when it comes up in the few seconds that it's there, then the information's just not visible anymore. I don't know. Anyway, it's better than nothing, at least. And there's a couple more user preferences, and they actually save now. So I have this thing. Before, if I would... Okay, you're too loud. That's... There, that'll do. So before, if I would start playing in background the thing, it would just always pause. But now I can decide whether I want it to do that or not. So, that's... sometimes you want one, sometimes you want the other. Right, and if you don't want those things popping up and covering the part of the screen for the amount of time that they do, don't save, reopen the same file, I can just set them to not pop up. Anyway, yeah, so preferences slowly expanding for the specific things that need to be there. There'll probably be a bunch more settings by the time this is done. Other thing, right, so I had this problem with my waveform. Let's open one of these that will actually open. I think this is the same file I used as an example for this before. Send to audio editor. That took a moment, but after it took a moment, now this is nice and smooth, and I can pan around here, and everything is perfectly responsive. Okay, that took a much longer moment than I expected it to. Whoa. Okay. So that's why that looked like that. That's just the sound there. I happened to zoom in on an interesting spot. Anyway, yeah, so what I'm doing here for large audio files is, well, I tried a few things. So before, what this waveform view was doing was it was examining every single sample in the entire audio file every time it needed to redraw itself, which obviously was pretty slow. The colors I've chosen for this cursor are not very visible in a noisy file like this. I mean, I can see it when I look at this solid blue here. But yeah, like that, where's the cursor? It's pretty hard to see. I should change those colors or do something else to make that more something. Okay. Yeah, like here it's almost completely disappeared. What if I put it like there, close to where there's a peak? Yeah, I would not know if I didn't know where to look where the cursor was right now. Okay, anyway, so that's for me. Yeah, so what I'm doing, I basically used the principle of mipmaps to solve this little problem. So a mipmap is usually a thing in GPU textures where, like, if you have a full-size image, let's say 512 by 512 pixels. I guess I could try and demonstrate here. Oh boy. This application right there. Was that showing me like Google autocomplete results there? I don't use Windows all that much. I kind of know how it works sometimes. Anyway, yeah, so let's say I had 512 by 512 and I drew something here. This is my texture. So, you know, when I'm looking at this texture applied to geometry very far away, it'd be drawn at something like that size. Doesn't look like much. It's a little hard to see. Let's draw with a larger... is there a paintbrush tool here? All right, here. I'll just do that just so you can see a little more clearly. Anyway, yeah, so a common technique for this is to store not only the 512 by 512 image, but also in VRAM, there would be a version that's 256 by 256, and a version that is, this would be mipmap level 1, I believe. Level 0 would be the 512 by 512. Mipmap level 2 would be 128. Anyway, yeah, so just scaling down by half for every mipmap level, just so that less memory has to be accessed and read to rasterize each pixel. So exact same principle I realized could apply here. And for the big chunky calculation it had to do at the start was taking this big waveform and cutting it in half with the results of the calculation of, like, at half this resolution, like where should the top and bottom of each line be. Cutting it in half again, cutting it in half again. I don't remember how many levels I go to, maybe like 8 or so. But anyway, when you get all the way out to the farthest out zoom level, there's just way less data that it has to parse through to draw all these peaks and valleys. This was fun to implement, and easier than it might sound. Didn't take too much effort. I'm looking at this, and yeah, that's totally clipping right there. Okay, yeah, this is making me realize I have no mechanism to detect or counteract this from within the sequencer itself, and that's probably something I would want someday. That's very much a someday thing, though. That's a fairly minor quality of life feature, at least for what I'm doing with this thing right now. Anyway, so yeah, this is nice and fast to work with. I had this other thing going on where on my laptop, when I would just sit and let a thing play for a while, you're a little noisy, so I'm not going to do it, but if I just sit and let the audio play, my CPU fan would always come on, and I was thinking of all sorts of stuff I needed to do to fix that, but then I realized that VSync was off, so it was just redrawing the screen as fast as possible, way more often than 60 hertz, so I just turned VSync on, and that fixed that issue. So that was a nice easy fix, and the mipmap thing was not too hard either, actually. So yeah, just satisfying to see this all the way zoomed out. So it's going to have to recalculate if I, like, cut out a section of the audio. Let's see how long this takes when I press delete here. Not very long. Way less time than... Oh, that's right. This took a surprisingly long time to render, so the mip mapping portion of that, now that the screen is rendered, let's try this again. Send to audio editor. No, that still took a while. It probably re-renders. Okay, anyway. Yeah, and the save before closing prompt comes up whenever I'm replacing anything in any of the 4 screens. It's still single document at a time, like I can't have 2 separate audio files open at once with their own undo history and everything. That's another, is sometime in the future sort of thing. But not now. Anyway, yeah. So another little thing I did, it was bothering me that, this is completely unrelated to the other stuff, but just an item on my to-do list that I knocked off. So looking at these, this number right here, it's not exactly 3.529. There are probably a lot more decimal places in there. And I realized there were a lot of cases where, like, let's say I wanted to measure a hertz value here. This is a good example, actually. I need to move this stuff around so this pop-up menu isn't, like, snugged against the bottom of the screen. It's so awkward to use. So many things I need to do. But anyway, let's say we're measuring peaks and, you know, I measure a hertz value of, what is that, 4 cycles? I mean, not exactly, but let's pretend it is. So I take this hertz value. If I were to copy that with Control-C and go over here and, you know, here, you don't play on parameter change. And I wanted this to be set to that. Now what it does is it takes the actual in-memory floating point representation of that number and copies it over, rather than the characters of 163.485. So let's try this. If I were to type a 5 here and press enter, let's see if this changes at all. I couldn't see it having changed. So maybe it was exactly that value. Anyway, but if there's a floating point number with more decimal precision, or maybe the change was just too small to see, with more decimal precision than is drawn in the field, that can now be copied and pasted losslessly. So anyway, just another little quality of life thing. It's very subtle when it happens. Like, I can also just copy the text if I don't select every character there. And I go over here and want to paste that. Oh, that's going to be quite a mess. Let's not put it there. Let's put it here. So yeah, I get the actual text if I don't have the whole thing copied. It's a little weird, but at least the thing is possible. Anyway, so the most visible thing that happened, other than the save before closing prompt, is I bit off this big to-do item that's been looking at me for a long time, which was to rethink how length of sound in the synthesizer is calculated. So what it used to be, and what it is on what are now my default settings here, so like these radio buttons are new, these are new, and this pop-up is new. And if I set this to specify, it'll give me a new slider and stuff. How it used to be and how it is now by default is that the length of sound is determined by the length of the amplitude envelope. Which means that if I make the sustain longer in this thing, then the sound gets longer. It's now that long. If I make it shorter, the entire output is just that much. But if I wanted something different, or let's say I had a flat amplitude envelope, this doesn't have it used to have a length slider, but now that I've changed this, that didn't make sense anymore. So by default, if this has nothing timing related encoded in it, then it's just 1 second long. So if I wanted a flat amplitude envelope, I would go over here and instead of specifying sound length by amplitude, I would tell it to specify by specify. Maybe I should reword that. And I can say, this sound is actually 2 seconds long. There we go, 2 seconds. And then if I go back to, say, an ADSR envelope, then that's whatever this is. Instead of stretching and squishing the whole thing, you can see it actually just move the envelope around because this no longer affects the length of the sound. This also gives me the ability to truncate my envelope and have it do... That looked like it was doing something weird at the end, but I think that was perhaps just an artifact of my... No, that's normal. It just looks funny because it's scrunched up like that. No, it's fine. Everything's good. Anyway, yeah, so the other thing I can do, does this make sense for this envelope? Maybe it does. If I change this to absolute... What does this mean again? I always get a little confused at it. Okay, so So when this is relative, whatever these numbers add up to, 0.1 plus 0.54 plus 0.2 plus 0.01, so 0.75 or whatever that is, that'll be the portion of the total, if it's relative, portion of the total length of sound that covers. So if I increase this length, it still covers the same relative amount. But then if I set it to absolute, then these numbers are measured as seconds. So this will always take 0.75 seconds or whatever it is, no matter how long the actual sound is. So yeah, it's confusing and hard to think about, even for me who invented the system. But it does good things. It does what I need it to. So I can just change my frame of reference both for this and for the entire sound for how it measures length. This is perhaps more useful for the frequency curve in a way, where I could set this to, let's do a ramp. So that travels from there to there very audibly. If I make the sound longer, let's make this flat actually for this, and quieter here. You're just gonna be too loud like that. Sure. So you can hear exactly where that travels from and to. I can change it to travel more. If I were to make this longer, let's see, this is set to relative, so let's set this to 2 seconds. So same total amount of frequency travel in twice the time, so it goes half as fast. But if I set this to absolute, what does it do actually? Okay, we have one more new set of radio buttons. This is now set to reset mode. So in reset mode, it takes the reset point, and once it reaches outside those bounds, it goes back to the beginning. I want this graph to update to reflect that. It should go up, then down, then up. Or have another mode switch where the graph can be relative or absolute. Or maybe it should just always be... I don't know. Or I could set this to clamp, where it would just go up and stay up. Or I could set it to extrapolate, goes up and keeps on going up. So this gives me better feature parity with SFXer, where that's how this just always works in extrapolate mode, basically. So if I have freak ramp up like this, and then I lengthen that sound or shorten it, it just keeps on going up in with a time reference of absolute. So yeah, I have that ability now, and that's going to be real nice for a lot of things. If I slightly tweak the length of my sound, I don't want to have to go back and manually adjust all the frequency curves to get them to line up again with particular marker points in here. It's just on its way to being friendlier about that. Anyway, so that's all very nice. And I can also, let's see, doesn't this have something to do with if I change the endpoint? Right, that changes. I really need to draw an overlay here showing where the endpoint is. Endpoint is about 2/3 through the sound now. So that's saying that the upward ramp value specifies this point, and then it extrapolates farther up. So if I say clamp, then you can see exactly what that does. If I say reset, and I set the reset point to something, then you can see exactly what that does. It's complicated. Anyway, so more options. And then if I'm playing PCM data here, what would I load? Let's load, sure, this thing. Okay, sure, whatever. I can also set the length specified by wave, and it crashes. Oh, all right, got something to investigate. I don't know why it does that, but I'll look into it on my own. I don't have time right now. But that's supposed to measure the length of the sound by the length of the PCM data sampler. So I can tie it to one of those if I just want to apply an amplitude envelope and frequency curve to an audio file. I can do that without having to just manually line up the length. So yeah, that was a good change. It was a bunch of work and a super pain to like take everything apart and put it back together with this new system. It's not all the way back together. I lost a couple of features. This thing I showed last time where I could change the stair steps, time scale, and stuff like that. I have a plan to implement it another way, but it's not there right now. But it'll get there. Anyway, yeah, so just a bunch of miscellaneous bug fixes and stability and performance improvements, things like that. Currently, it's not done right now, but I'm fighting with anti-aliasing once more. Oh, that's an unpleasant sound. But yeah, like I talked about anti-aliasing with, here, you just turn off. With a pulse wave, where if I set it to a high frequency, I had to actually adjust this to, like, you know, you can see this is not a straight up and down line. It has some in-between values for to actually make it sound smooth. Do I want to make this sound? Let's see how unpleasant this is. Yeah, it's not that bad. But this would sound much more artifacty without that. I don't have the checkbox here anymore because I just always want anti-aliasing. There's no reason I would ever turn it off. But yeah, Sawtooth's giving me problems. It's much harder to calculate how that works than it was for the pulse wave, as it turns out. Trying to also do it for spline, so anti-alias any arbitrary shape that could have, like, discontinuities in the middle like this. Yeah, it's not the easiest thing. Anyway, but that's whatever. So, I've made a little decision here. With this application as it is, things are a little bit out of balance. I've just kind of been like messing around and polishing up this one tool for the last, as long as I can remember. And what this tool needs is a purpose for being. It had one at the start of its life, but right now, a lot of the work I've been doing has just been for the tool's own sake. So I'm going to try a little experiment here. I'm going to actually set down this project for the next 3 weeks and work on something else. Anything else. Probably going to be some work in the tile editor. I still have some ideas of what I want to do with that. And that'll take me closer to where I need to be, just like with globally, with all my projects that I want to do that could touch this, or the projects that could touch Foresight Fight, because that's what this was for. But I don't know, everything's in a weird position, and it's in a weird position because I've been focusing on this singular tool for so long. But yeah, this isn't done yet, but the path to completion is, it hasn't yet been revealed to me. So yeah, gonna do something else for a little while, and come back to this when that something else leads to a need to synthesize audio or write a piece of music. And then it will become much more clear when I have work with a purpose to do in this tool as a tool, rather than just working on the tool itself. It'll become much more clear where it needs to go to get to completion. Software development is complicated. No matter what I do, I'm happy with little bits and pieces of it, but it's so hard to be happy with the big picture. Every once in a while I am, though. But yeah, so a thing needs to happen for this to move forward, and it's not to continue working on this with a singular focus. So yeah, I'll see you in 3 weeks with I don't even know what now, so you'll be as surprised as I will once we get there, I guess. Anyway, yeah, so see you next time with something.